This is part 2 to my Outer Wilds lore videos. If you haven't seen part 1, I highly recommend starting there, as it covers the path laid out by the Nomai, who set the scene for our own character, the Hatchling. Massive spoilers incoming, so don't watch this video if you plan on playing the game in the future. Outer Wilds makes you feel important, without being special. Your character, the Hatchling, isn't the chosen one, nor are they overly talented in any way. They are merely a humble villager off on their very first adventure. And this is part of what makes the game so special. The Hathians are a blue, four-eyed, genderless species with a penchant for exploring the solar system. They live on Timber Hearth, a quaint little planet filled with geysers, forests, and comfortable weather. The Hathians have evolved substantially since the time of the Nomai. They are now bipedal and are no longer water-bound. Interestingly, the Nomai remarked that the Hathian ancestors were a hardy breed and would be well adapted to the world. The Nomai also hypothesized that the Hathians would be into metallurgy. In reality, the Hathians primarily relied on rickety wooden structures and lacked the complex engineering that the Nomai mastered. It's important to note that the Nomai are partly responsible for the Hathians' continued existence. During the Nomai's lives, they identified that Proto-Hathians were living in one of their potential mining sites, and they elected to relocate to a different site rather than risk disrupting the species. Let's talk about the character we play, a young Hathian who we only know as the Hatchling. At the start of the game, the Hatchling awakens by a campfire on Timber Hearth. It is the day they make their maiden journey into space, and it is customary to sleep under the stars the night before. The Hatchling's journey is already rather special, as they are the first Hathian to be given a Nomai translator, which allows them to understand the ancient Nomai texts found throughout the solar system. As the Hatchling opens their eyes to begin their day, they see the orbital probe cannon fire a probe and immediately fall apart. The Hatchling fails to understand its significance. We, the player, now know that this represents the beginning of a new loop. It is during this loop that the eye will be found. As the Hatchling prepares to leave the town, they venture through the observatory on Timber Hearth to gather the launch codes. If the Hatchling takes the time to study the observatory, they can learn about the objects and events that will become important later in the game. On their way out of the observatory, they pass by an inactive Nomai statue. At this precise moment, the probe finds the eye, sending the signal for the Ash Twin Project, the ATP, to awaken the statues and bond with the Nomai. Of course, the Nomai are long gone, and the Hatchling just so happens to be in the right place at the right time. The statue wakes up, opens its eyes, and pairs with the Hatchling. From this point on, the Hatchling will be aware that the loops are happening. Although the loops have been occurring for a long time by this point, this is the first time that the Hatchling is aware, and will therefore be able to learn things across loops. Another statue is also active, bonded to the probe tracking module. This allows the eye's location to be remembered across loops. Now, at the end of each loop, the ATP sends 2 pieces of information back in time by 22 minutes. The first is the memories of any people bonded to the Nomai statues and masks, and the second is a signal telling the orbital probe cannon to fire a probe. But the Hatchling doesn't know any of this yet. All they know is that they have their launch codes, and they are ready to take flight and explore the mysteries of the solar system. Much of the Hatchling's time is spent learning about the past, the history of the Nomai, to understand how they came to be in the loop and where they can go from here. I won't rehash what the Hatchling learns about the Nomai's experiments, and quantum principles, as I've already covered it in great detail in part 1. This video is mostly limited to things that were important and unique to the Hatchling's journey. Now, there are a few musically gifted Hathians that the Hatchling can come across on their journey. They are 4 active adventurers, Feldspar, Chert, Rebeck, and Gabbro, as well as 1 older astronaut, Eskar. Let's start with Feldspar. Feldspar is a fearless superstar adventurer who vanished during one of their expeditions. They have not been seen for a long time, and the Hathians on Timber Hearth often remark about their disappearance. It turns out that Feldspar was the first Hathian to explore Dark Bramble. However, they were ambushed by an anglerfish and made a quick attempt to escape. Feldspar survived, but their ship was damaged in the process, stranding them on Dark Bramble. They took refuge in an anglerfish skeleton where the hatchling can find them relaxing by a campfire, in no hurry to leave. Feldspar can offer helpful tips for the hatchling's travels, though they insist on the hatchling discovering the solutions for themselves. Chert is an astronomer who can be found camping on the Ember Twin, which, along with the Ash Twin, are the closest planets to the Sun. When the hatchling talks to them, they mention that there are more supernovas in the sky than usual, and the hatchling can observe this for themselves. Next is Rebek. Rebek is the space traveller who is terrified of space. They wound up on Brittle Hollow, a planet that is slowly crumpling into the black hole at its core. Rebek is hiding away in a relatively stable part, and is also in no hurry to leave. They are an archaeologist, and the hatchling can chat to them excitedly about their Nomai-related findings. Gabbro is a laid-back, humorous Hathian who has been exploring the large, water-based planet of Giant's Deep. Gabbro is the only other Hathian to be experiencing the loops in the same way as the hatchling. This is because, while they were exploring the planet, a statue awoke nearby and bonded with them, in the same way that one did to the hatchling. But unlike the hatchling, Gabbro is not equipped with a Nomai translator, and is therefore unable to solve the mystery of what is happening to them. So they remain on a hammock on Giant's Deep, content with their lot in life. Gabbro is also quite unique, as they are the only Hathian that understands quantum effects. They knew that the quantum shards were moving around due to them existing in all possibilities until being observed by a conscious observer. They also wrote a quantum poem, which rearranges itself when it's not being observed. The other Hathians don't take Gabbro seriously, and his quantum idea is mocked at the observatory. Finally, we have Eskar. Eskar is an older, retired astronaut, living alone on Timberhearth's moon, known as the Atlarok. Eskar is rather lonely, as few astronauts wind up on the moon nowadays. These 5 astronauts impact the hatchling's life and are important to the finale of the story. The Quantum Moon is one of the most interesting places the hatchling can visit, as it brings together all the quantum principles the hatchling learns on their journey. As I explained in my last video, the Quantum Moon is the Eye's moon, and it possesses some of the properties that the Eye does. Hence, it is quantum just like the Eye is, and it's able to orbit around all the planets of the Hathian solar system and around the Eye simultaneously until a conscious observer observes it, forcing it to appear in a single location. On the Quantum Moon, the hatchling can encounter Selenium, a Nomai who has curiously found herself trapped after her people perished. She exists only at the 6th location of the Quantum Moon, which is the moon's orbit around the Eye. Although hundreds of thousands of years have passed since the Nomai perished, Selenium remains unchanged at the 6th location, and she herself questions whether she is truly alive. I actually found her story to be so touching that I've made a separate video on her life, but for now, let's focus on the hatchling's interactions with Selenium. The hatchling can ask questions of Selenium using some stones with images on them, and Selenium can answer these questions by projecting writing on a wall. The hatchling is able to translate these answers using their trusty Nomai translator. The hatchling can learn a lot from Selenium, including the motives of her people and their understanding of the Eye. But more endearingly, through these texts we can see that Selenium wishes to be considered the hatchling's friend. Unfortunately, Selenium cannot understand the hatchling, and there is nothing the hatchling can do for her. There's a more pressing matter to attend to, the destruction of the universe. As the hatchling explores the solar system for what feels like the very first time, the sun is about to go supernova. It can be seen gaining mass, turning into a red giant before finally collapsing in a beautifully deadly display. This marks the end of the 22-minute cycle and the beginning of the next. Over the course of the 22-minute loop, the astronomer Chert realizes what is happening to the sun and begins to have an existential crisis. There are several things that happen to the solar system and the surrounding stars over the 22-minute cycle. First, as the sun becomes a red giant, its size and gravity increase. It gets closer to the sun station, and the sun station is being pulled towards the sun more strongly. Towards the end of the cycle, the sun station will be consumed by the sun. Second, much of Brittle Hollow collapses into its own core, the black hole, after finally succumbing to the constant bombardment from its volcanic moon. Third, the sand drains completely from the ash twin to the ember twin, the timing of which is oddly coincidental, with the final sand being drained right before the sun goes supernova. Fourth, and probably most sadly, space becomes visibly less populated, as stars are going supernova at an alarming rate. By the end of the 22-minute cycle, the sky has lost a lot of its brightness. The universe is truly ending. The hatchling cannot stop the end of the universe, but they can focus on completing the Nomai's goals of finding the eye of the universe. The only question is, how? After retracing the Nomai steps over the course of the game, and many, many loops, the hatchling learns that they only need 3 things to get to the eye. First, they need the eye's coordinates, which can be extracted from the tracking module. Second, they'll need the Nomai spaceship, the vessel, which is capable of warping to any location. And third, they'll need a way to power the vessel. So, let's start with obtaining the coordinates of the eye. After the probe was released to find the eye, it was supposed to be tracked by the probe tracking module. Unfortunately, we know from the last video that the tracking module was never actually installed on the cannon, as it fell down to the core of Giant's Deep. This is problematic, as the core of Giant's Deep is well protected, first by an impenetrable strong current that repels anything that comes close to the core, and second, by an electrical force. The Nomai themselves were confused with how the tracking module reached the core, and never themselves visited the core. But Feldspar did, learning that there was a rare type of tornado that would propel them down towards the core. Now there's just the issue of the electrical field. Nothing passes through this field, except the jellyfish. Feldspar was again the first to solve this puzzle, and the hatchling retraces their steps, hitching a ride on the inside of a jellyfish, as the jellyfish makes their cyclical passage through the electrical field. Now the hatchling is free to explore the core, and to read the contents of the probe tracking module. Here, they learn the location of the eye. Now they need a way to get there. On to finding the vessel. Recall that the Nomai ship, the vessel, was entangled deep within Dark Bramble, a mysterious planet that has become overgrown with a parasitic plant. The hatchling will need to make the journey through Dark Bramble to reach the vessel. This is difficult because the planet is much larger on the inside than the exterior would suggest. There are many nodes within Dark Bramble, leading to more sections in a maze-like fashion. But this isn't the only problem. Within Dark Bramble, massive, hostile anglerfish lurk, dormant. The anglerfish are blind, but will be alerted by the softest of sounds, awakening with a roar, and diving towards the hatchling, devouring them and their ship alike. To reach the vessel, the hatchling must move quietly past the anglerfish, from node to node. Eventually, the hatchling will stumble upon the Anglerfish Nest, a collection of red eggs heavily guarded by 4 anglerfish. If the hatchling can survive this section, they can travel through a final node, reaching the vessel. Around the vessel, we find the Nomai corpses of those who never made it out of Dark Bramble. Fortunately, the vessel is in good condition, but its advanced warp core is broken, preventing the ship from warping out of Dark Bramble. So, the hatchling only needs to find an advanced warp core. Easy, right? Fortunately, there's still one core that exists. But there's an even bigger problem. It powers the Ash Twin project. Without power, the ATP will not be able to send information back in time by 22 minutes. Thus, the loops will end. So removing the advanced warp core is an action that should not be taken lightly. If the hatchling dies after removing the advanced warp core, it ends the game. But many years ago, the Nomai made the risky, albeit unsuccessful, decision to force the sun to go supernova in order to find the eye. Now, the hatchling must make a similar decision to end the cycles and any chance of altering their fate, all in hopes of observing the eye. But really, it's a bit less dramatic than that. There's nothing else a hatchling can do. Either the hatchling keeps repeating these loops ad infinitum, or they try to move forward by warping to the eye's location. So the hatchling takes the advanced warp core, and they make the perilous journey back through dark bramble to the vessel. They replace the advanced warp core and input the eye's coordinates. And a plan 280,000 years in the making finally comes to fruition. It is time to observe the eye. As the hatchling warps to the eye, a series of bizarre and wonderfully poignant events occur. The hatchling lands at the observatory on Timber Hearth, but it has changed. Now, rather than hinting at what the hatchling will encounter during their adventures, the observatory serves as a place of reflection, where the player can remember aspects of the game and piece together parts that they may have missed at first. As they walk up to the observatory staircase, they can find a model of the eye and interact with it, thus observing it. This reveals to the hatchling that it is not just their own system that was destroyed, but all systems. The hatchling can do nothing but watch as the lights of the galaxies are erased before their eyes. But the destruction of the universe is not quite the end. The hatchling now lands among the mysterious ancient glade, where they can approach a campfire and meet Eskar again. The hatchling must gather the other Hearthian adventurers to the campsite before anything can commence. If the hatchling met Selenium, they also need to find her. Now, I think it is important to mention here that the ancient glade is likely a manifestation of the hatchling's memories which the hatchling draws upon as they observe the eye. So, the Hearthians and Selenium aren't truly at the glade, but they were important enough to the hatchling that they are remembered by the hatchling at the end of all things. The game never makes this point explicitly clear, and I'm not sure whether the developers confirmed it, but it seems to be the most reasonable answer for several reasons. First, the ancient glade looks like the hatchling's home planet, Timber Hearth. Second, all of the hatchling's fellow astronauts are there, despite being erased during the supernova event. And third, Selenium can speak the Hearthian tongue to the hatchling, despite never being able to talk to them at the sixth location. Once the hatchling has gathered the group of adventurers, they all play one final piece of music together. The song is richer and more complete if the hatchling had met Selenium and she is able to join in. Once everyone is playing, the hatchling is ready to complete their journey, as all the possibilities of the eye are forced into a singularity, a single new universe. A big bang marks the entrance of the new universe and heralds the end for the hatchling, an insignificant individual who had the most significant role in shaping the new universe. Though the hatchling is not around to witness it, in 14.3 billion years we can observe the world the hatchling helped bring into existence. The final scene takes place on a tree-filled planet, not unlike Timber Hearth. If the hatchling never met Selenium, this is all we see. But if the hatchling's life had been enriched through meeting Selenium, and they could draw upon her memory when observing the eye, then the universe that is observed contains sentient life. We can see insectoid creatures gathering around a campfire, not unlike the Hearthians. After the death of a universe, a new one brings forth life, thanks to the hatchling's interaction with Selenium. I think it makes sense to consider the ending at the eye as the official ending, but there are other ways you can end the hatchling's journey prematurely. Generally, dying during the 22-minute loop will simply lead to the hatchling resuming their journey at the beginning of the next loop. But there are a few exceptions. Let's cover them here. The fastest way to end the hatchling's journey is to die immediately after starting the game, such as through burning yourself on a campfire. Because the hatchling is not bonded with a Nomai statue at the beginning of the game, their memories are not being sent back by 22 minutes, so the hatchling would not behave any differently across loops, because they aren't learning from the previous ones. You can also get this ending if you remove the advanced warp core from the ATP and die before warping to the eye. This happened to me many times as I travelled through Dark Bramble while trying to capture footage for this video. The next ending is the isolation ending. If the hatchling takes the core that powers the ATP and flies far, far away from the solar system, they will be safe from the supernova, but they are doomed nonetheless. Without the ATP powered, the loops won't occur, so the hatchling is trapped in outer space alone, with no home to return to. The hatchling will die when the spaceship's resources run out. My personal favourite ending is the "You broke spacetime" ending. So, we know that when information is sent back in time using warp cores, the object is observed at the receiver before actually warping. This means that, for a very brief period in time, the object appears in two locations, right outside both warp cores. If the hatchling removes the black hole warp core while the object exists in these two states, the object technically never warped but is still appearing in both locations. This creates a paradox. The object cannot exist in a second location if it never left the first. Congratulations, hatchling! You have ripped apart the fabric of time and space. Give yourself a well-earned pat on the back. But that's not the only way you can destroy space-time. When a sun goes supernova, the core of the ATP opens up, exposing the black hole in the centre of the ash twin. At this point, as the supernova consumes the ash twin, the hatchling can jump towards the black hole, momentarily creating two copies of themselves, right as the solar system is destroyed. At the beginning of the next loop, the hatchling awakens at the campfire again, with everything seemingly in its place. But when they open their map, they can observe two markers with the "You Are Here" label. One belongs to them, and one is appearing at the ATP. If the hatchling travels to the ATP, they can meet a copy of themselves and talk to them. If this loop ends without the hatchling jumping through the black hole again, then there was no cause for the duplicated self to be present. So the causal loop is broken, and so is space-time. Finally, we have the quantum moon ending. This is the most depressing ending in my opinion. After removing the advanced warp core, the hatchling can flee to the sixth location and escape the death of the universe, but is now doomed to a much worse fate. Here, along with Selenium, the hatchling loses track of time and feels its journey has come to an end, an eternity doomed to this halfway existence. All these endings suffer a similar fate. Because the eye was not observed, a new universe is not formed after the death of the current one. It truly does appear to be the end of everything, forever. So let's pretend I didn't end my journey prematurely in Dark Bramble, shall we? So let's summarise the game, assuming that the hatchling did reach the eye and observe the new universe being born. The Nomai did not know what the eye's purpose was, but they felt compelled to find it. In the same way, the hatchling feels compelled to complete the journey. After all, what else is there to do at the end of the universe? In this way, the hatchling really just stood on the shoulders of giants. It was the Nomai's meticulous planning hundreds of thousands of years ago that enabled the hatchling to observe the eye. It's also important to reiterate that the Nomai weren't relentless in their search for the eye. We know that the Nomai weren't willing to sacrifice the Hathians in their search for ore. It's only because the Nomai were both driven to find the eye, but also caring for future generations, that the hatchling was able to fulfill their dream. Outer Wilds does a wonderful job of offering the player closure, without answering all the questions the player may have. The biggest and seemingly most important question posed in the game was, what exactly is the Eye of the Universe? Is the eye itself conscious? Did it intentionally signal to the Nomai? And if so, was it in the hopes that the Nomai would find it, or knowing that the hatchling would eventually find it even though the Nomai failed? We never received the answers to these questions. I was pondering them for quite a while after the game, but then I decided that it didn't really matter. I felt satisfied with the conclusion. The game managed to keep an air of mystery without being needlessly opaque. The eye remains beyond comprehension, and that's okay. The story feels complete. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed making it. You can find me on Twitch as Miss_Cherries, where I stream at least 3 times a week, and my schedule can be found on the website. Links to all my other socials are in the description below. A link to my playlist of other Outer Wilds videos can also be found there. Keep an eye out for my video on Selenium, which will be up in a week. And lastly, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much again, and I hope you have a phenomenal day. Goodbye!